people who didn't know him went through the myth and the legend and all the rumors more than anything else, and did not go directly to people who knew Adolph, because if you talk to those people that were close to him, he was very concerned about, about race. He was very concerned about, segregation. He's very concerned about, when is it going to happen, in the South.
He was a man with a really big heart, and a person who was very charitable, and a person that would help everybody.
Let's not define Coach Rupp by a 1966 game. Let's define him about that at the end of his life, he was progressive, and he even had affection for me. You see what I'm saying? Let's define him, and let's look at where that went to. Let's look at what's become of that. Let's look at where we're at now.
In a building named for Adolph Rupp, the University of Kentucky plays just as it did when he was coaching at the highest level. Today's roster is made up primarily of African Americans.
Just seeing how more diverse the squad is now, and everybody seems to be behind the team. I still believe, however, that shadow of Adolph Rupp is still casting across the University of Kentucky, whether people like it or not, in this sort of negative light.
UK, not only UK, Dick, but I think the entire state of Kentucky has suffered unfairly for the way this whole Rupp situation has been misrepresented. It has given us a stigma that we don't deserve to have. And there are still some African-American, older African-Americans who will never be Kentucky fans because of what they believe to be true about Rupp.
A lot of the young people are not aware of it. They just want to be on national television, but that generation that was here is, still alive and doing well and has not forgotten. And, African Americans have a long memory, and, they share those things, with their children. And, people still ask me, how's it going over there? As if the University of Kentucky is like a distant island, even when it's right here, in the midst of Lexington. And so, that disconnect is still very present, 40-some years later.
Helping to close the gap is the head coach, hired in 1997. The athletics director at the time, C.M. Newton, believed he was the best man for the job.
The fact that race wasn't a consideration in the hiring of Tubby, I think, speaks volumes. But then the fact that he's been so accepted, and much of that is Tubby. He's a very unique and special man, as is Donna, but it also speaks well for people. We're looking at people as people and not based necessarily on the color of their skin.
When he investigated and looked around, saw my background and saw the things and how I conducted myself and how I handled myself, he thought he knew I could handle this situation. And whether I was black or white, I think didn't make much difference to him. It was whether I could do the job or not.
I think that that's one of the greatest things that's ever happened in Kentucky. And Tubby Smith, without question, is likened to Martin Luther King when it comes to the basketball world.
I wrote him a letter, okay? And I told him, it was the greatest thing that ever happened in the state of Kentucky. Now, it's not going to be the easiest thing for you, but it's the greatest thing that ever happened.
Tubby's doing it the right way. I think his kids represent the school and the state the way that my father would want them to represent the state and the school. And I think there's no question about it. He'd be very proud of Tubby.
I think they're kind of cut out of the same cloth, in my opinion. I mean, Tubby makes them go to school, makes them behave. If they don't, then go someplace else and play.
He's following in the kind of the footsteps of success that Adolph first laid down. I think that's what Adolph wanted. Adolph wanted to create a kingdom, and he did.
Now that he's gotten the long-term contract, and I think that the state now understands he's going to be there for a while.
okay, this is our guy. Let's embrace him. Let's see if let's see if he can continue this tradition for the next 4 or 5 years. And that's very good to see, because of the mere fact that, in a sense, he's a pioneer and he doesn't even know it.
And right now at the University of Kentucky, the program is as great as it's ever been. And the greatest irony in the whole story is that, Tubby, Smith is black. And already has won an NCAA championship. And so, history has always proven that if you will pay attention to what happened to you in the past and what you are about and where you came from, then you can be even greater in the future.
All Kentuckians care so much about the university and about their program, and that's whether you're black or white, that I think it took a lot of people where they had to kind of look inside themselves and say, does this really make a difference? I think the answer by the real Kentucky fan was, whoever our coach is, we're going to support them if they're green, purple dot, polka dot or whatever.
That's an honor, and it's a privilege, and I carry this, knowing that I am a black man representing not just a race, but representing the Wildcat Nation, representing the University of Kentucky, and what we stand for here, and I just and promoting all the virtues that this university and this community and this state has to offer around the nation, around the world.
Unfortunately for Tubby or any other coach, it all boils down to one word, and that's win.
On January 19, 2005, Kentucky played Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi. 9 out of 10 starters were black. There were 2 black head coaches, and it was just another basketball game on a crisp winter night.
Oh, it's a given now. It's a given. And thank God. I look at it. Thank God.
C.M. Newton at Alabama played 5 black players at Alabama first, I think, in the SEC. He was one of Adolph's players, certainly one of Adolph's acolytes. So when you see it today, it's normal. It's normal everywhere, and it's a good thing to see that poison that existed in the 60s has been drained out of it.
Gradually, it was going to come, and of course, once it came, it was a tidal wave. And now we have so many quality black athletes playing in the South, really good ones, and coaches.
You look at Alabama, you look at Mississippi's teams, you look at Georgia's teams, and they're predominantly black. And those kids don't have a clue how this all turned around. If Perry Wallace hadn't done what he did, they wouldn't even have been there,
It was a tidal wave triggered the day Wallace signed. He says occasionally he finds himself talking to Southerners who admit they were less than accepting when he became the SEC's first black player.
What happens is that I appreciate what's going on when we meet. Our circles are rounding out. And so I understand that, and whenever it happens, I appreciate how important it is.
Circles are eternal, and it's likely the debate about Adolph Rupp will be as well. He was a man some believe should have done more, who used racially insensitive language at a time it was becoming socially unacceptable, but also, according to those who knew him best, a man who did try to effect change the best way he knew how.
I paid strict attention to my own business, and if you do that, you get along. I didn't try to step on anyone else's toes, and I didn't try to run over anybody, and I didn't try to demand any attention or anything like that. I just went along and got my knitting needle and went to knitting.
He started pushing the Southeastern Conference to desegregate in the late 50s and early 60s, and when word of his intentions swept through the South, he had his life threatened. Still, so many have chosen to define him by one basketball game. At least future generations now have more facts to consider about the Baron of basketball, Adolph Rupp.
Hello, I'm Larry Connolly, just one of the many former players for University of Kentucky coach Adolph Rupp. This documentary on Coach Rupp was produced by WKYT TV in Lexington and brought to you by former players and friends of the coach. I was asked to represent this group for this special presentation and was honored to be able to do so. If you talk to any of Coach Rupp's former players, they would undoubtedly share a similar sentiment. Many of you know Coach Rupp and his basketball legend. From his arrival in Lexington in 1930, Rupp was one of college basketball's true pioneers. He accumulated 876 wins, captured 27 Southeastern Conference titles, and led the Cats to 4 national championships. When he left UK in 1972, he had more wins than any other coach in the history of college basketball. He made Kentucky basketball synonymous with winning and excellence. For those who knew and loved Coach Rupp, he was much more than a basketball coach. His love for basketball was only trumped by his devotion to academics. He was a fiercely loyal and highly competitive man. He took great pride in our accomplishments off the hardwood as well as our play on it. Basketball may have been his profession, but family and friends were very important to him. I was fortunate to have been a player on Coach Rupp's team of 1966, the team that lost the NCAA championship to Texas Western. Following that game nearly 4 decades ago, a lot has been written and said about Coach Rupp. Much of it was untrue. The one thing that I can attest to is that Coach Rupp never, in my presence, said a negative thing about his fellow man, regardless of their color or religion. Ask any of his former players, recruits or foes, and you will get the same story. Our goal tonight was to shed some light onto the life and career of Adolph Rupp, to show you the man we, his former players and friends, admired and respected. We hope you enjoyed the documentary, and we hope you remember the Baron of the Bluegrass for what he truly is, a Kentucky legend and a college basketball icon.